Why do we always feel lost? Have you ever stopped to wonder why, despite all the distractions, we are constantly searching for something we can't quite define? Why does it seem like we are endlessly chasing a sense of purpose, only to find ourselves lost in the noise, in the rush of life? Can it be that the very essence of who we are, the reason we feel this emptiness, is a lie we've been told since birth? What if the truth has been hidden in plain sight all along, buried beneath the surface of our everyday existence? And what if the key to freedom, to liberation, lies not in the world around us but in the quiet solitude of our own minds? Sartre, the philosopher who walked the thin line between liberation and despair, offers a guide that may be more relevant today than ever before. But before we rush to understand, we must first confront the discomfort, the suffocating tension that comes with truly looking at ourselves. To seek the truth is to face a terrifying reality, that we are alone, and in that aloneness, we hold the power to define who we are. But how can we reconcile the weight of that responsibility? How can we live with the knowledge that we are not simply products of our environment, but creators of our own existence? What if we've been told the wrong story all our lives? What if the answers that we cling to, the things we believe, will free us are not the truth but mere illusions crafted by a world that fears the power of solitude? For Sartre, freedom is not a gift, not a luxury to be enjoyed when we feel safe. Freedom is the terrifying realization that we are not bound by fate, by society, or by some higher power. We are bound only by the choices we make, and every choice is a responsibility we must bear. But do we really want that kind of freedom? Have we truly considered what it means to live without excuses, without a preordained path? In the silence of our solitude, Sartre's philosophy rings out louder than any voice could ever speak. It demands that we stand face to face with our existence, stripped of all the comforting lies that have been whispered to us for centuries. And in that silence, we will hear a truth that is both liberating and terrifying. We are the architects of our own meaning. What if I told you that everything you've been taught about success, happiness, and fulfillment is a distraction, a veil to keep you from confronting the brutal reality of your existence? The truth is, most of us live our lives in a state of denial, clinging to the lies of comfort and certainty, too afraid to face the deep abyss of nothingness that lies beneath. But Sartre challenges us to look deeper, to go beyond the surface of our daily routines, our social roles, and our ingrained beliefs. What is the cost of living a life without truly seeing ourselves? There is a deep, quiet power in solitude, but it is a power that terrifies us. It strips away the masks we wear, the identities we cling to, and leaves us naked before ourselves. What if the key to freedom is not in the external world, in achievements or accolades, but in the internal world, in the moments we spend alone with our thoughts? Could it be that in our rush to find ourselves in others, we've lost the only truth that truly matters? The paradox of Sartre's philosophy is this: freedom comes at a cost. It demands that we embrace our own nothingness, that we accept the existential weight of living a life without predetermined meaning. And in that very acceptance, we find our true freedom. But this is not an easy path to walk. The world around us will push us, will urge us to follow the crowd, to conform, to be like everyone else. And every moment we spend in the comfort of the collective consciousness is another moment we stray from our authentic selves. What if the most profound form of rebellion is not in fighting the world around us, but in fighting the lies we tell ourselves? What if our deepest desire for connection, for belonging, is nothing more than a distraction from the terrifying reality that we are alone in this world? Sartre forces us to ask ourselves, what if our quest for happiness, for fulfillment, is rooted in a false belief that there is something outside of us that can complete us? What if the answer to all our searching lies in the simple yet profound truth that we are enough as we are? In the quiet solitude of our own minds, we are faced with the most terrifying realization of all. We have the power to shape our own existence. But with that power comes an immense responsibility. The choices we make, the paths we choose, are ours to own, no one else's. And that means that we must take full accountability for our lives, for the person we become. But what if we're not ready for that responsibility? What if we are too afraid to take ownership of our own freedom? It is in this fear, this hesitation, that we find the heart of Sartre's existentialism. Freedom is not something to be embraced lightly. It is not the freedom to do whatever we want without consequence. It is the freedom to live authentically, to take full responsibility for our choices, and to confront the unbearable weight of existence without flinching. And yet, we run from it. We hide from it in distractions, in busyness, in the noise of the world. But Sartre's message is clear. The only way out of the maze of confusion and uncertainty is to confront the very thing we fear the most, ourselves. How often have we turned to others, to society, to the world, for validation, for a sense of purpose? What if the truth is that we will never find our way until we look within? Sartre's philosophy forces us to face the ultimate question. Who are we really? Not who society tells us to be, not who our parents or friends or colleagues think we should be, but who we truly are in the depths of our own consciousness. And here lies the most profound and terrifying truth of all. To be free is to be alone. To be truly free is to stand in the silence of your own mind, unafraid of what you may find there. But that silence is deafening. It is uncomfortable. It demands that we listen, really listen, to the whispers of our own soul. And what we may hear there may terrify us, because in that silence, we are confronted with the raw truth of who we are, stripped of all the illusions we've built around ourselves. So what do we do with this knowledge? Sartre doesn't offer us a comforting answer. There is no simple path, no easy solution. What he offers us is the truth, the uncomfortable, unsettling truth, that only in the silence of solitude can we truly find ourselves. The question is, will we dare to listen? Will we dare to confront the darkness within, to face the terrifying freedom that comes with owning our existence? Or will we continue to hide, to run, to live in the comforting lies of the world around us? Only you can answer that question. But be warned, once you hear Sartre's message, once you confront the uncomfortable reality of your own freedom, there is no turning back. The journey to self-discovery is not for the faint of heart. It is a path that demands courage, that requires you to step into the unknown and embrace the solitude of your own existence. But in that solitude you may just find the freedom you've been searching for all along. As you sit there, the silence surrounding you becomes overwhelming. It presses against your chest, pulls at your thoughts, and refuses to let go. Can you feel it too? The weight of that stillness, the depth of that quiet, as if the universe itself has come to a halt, just to let you feel how truly alone you are in this world. You look around, and for a brief moment there is nothing. No distractions, no noise, no safety nets of society to cushion your fall. It is in this silence that we encounter the truth, a truth that is so unnerving that it forces us to look away. But why do we run from it? What is it about solitude that frightens us so deeply? It is not just the absence of others, but the presence of ourselves, naked and unmasked. The paradox, however, is that within this solitude, there lies a door to freedom. But this freedom comes at a price. It demands that we face the shadows of our own existence. It demands that we confront the truths we've buried deep within us, hidden beneath layers of distraction, of noise, of activity. Sartre's philosophy pushes us into this confrontation, daring us to look within and ask, who are we really? Not the image we project to the world, not the masks we wear for comfort or acceptance, but the raw, unadulterated truth of our own being. Can we handle it? Can we accept the terrifying responsibility of defining ourselves, of choosing who we are without the crutch of external validation? In these moments when the distractions fall away and we are left with nothing but ourselves, we realize just how fragile our sense of identity truly is. Have you ever thought about how easily we lose ourselves in the expectations of others, in the roles we are assigned, in the things we are told we must be? The pressure of society, of culture, to fit into predetermined molds. And yet, in that silence, we realize something crucial. The world outside is not the source of our freedom. The chains that bind us are not made of other people's expectations, but of our own fear. Fear of what we might become if we stand on our own, if we let go of the comforting lie that someone else will save us, that someone else will tell us who we are. It is in this space, in this silence, that we confront our greatest enemy, ourselves. But freedom, as Sartre teaches us, is not a simple concept. It is not the freedom to do whatever we want. No, true freedom is the terrifying ability to create ourselves from nothing. It is the weight of the choices we make, the burden of knowing that every action, every thought, every word carries the power to shape our destiny. In this freedom we find both liberation and terror. Liberation, because we are no longer confined to the roles that others have imposed upon us. But terror, because we must now face the consequences of creating our own path. There is no one to blame but ourselves. There is no escape, no one to point to when things go wrong. We alone hold the power, and with that power comes an unbearable responsibility. This is where the journey takes an even darker turn. For as we begin to explore the depths of our own consciousness, we are faced with a disturbing realization. We may not like what we find there. We may not like the person we've become, or the choices we've made. There are memories buried in the recesses of our minds, painful reminders of past failures, of moments when we chose the easy path instead of the right one. We can try to push these memories aside, try to forget them, but they will always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to resurface. What will we do with them? Will we acknowledge them, or will we continue to bury them, hoping they will disappear? And in this choice we find the real cost of freedom. The courage to face our past without flinching, the strength to stand in the presence of our mistakes and still move forward. It is this journey into the self that truly tests us. Sartre's existentialism challenges us to dig deeper than we've ever dared to go, to step into the unknown and confront the very essence of our existence. And as we do, we are forced to question everything we thought we knew about ourselves. Are we the sum of our choices, or are we something more? Are we the product of our circumstances, or do we have the power to break free from them? What if the truth lies somewhere in between, that we are both the architects and the prisoners of our own lives? This is the paradox that Sartre presents. We are free, but that freedom is not a gift. It is a responsibility, one that we must accept or reject, but never ignore. But even as we struggle with these heavy questions, there is something strangely comforting about the process. In the midst of all the uncertainty, there is a strange peace that comes from knowing that we are in control. For the first time, we realize that we are not victims of fate, not powerless in the face of life's challenges. We are the creators of our own meaning. And in that realization, there is a profound sense of empowerment. But make no mistake, this empowerment is not without its cost. For with this realization comes an unsettling question. If we are the creators of our own meaning, what will we create? And can we live with the consequences of that creation? This question is where the tension intensifies. For as we begin to craft our own existence, we are confronted with the most terrifying reality of all. We are not alone in this process. There are others around us, and they too are crafting their own existence. What happens when our choices collide with theirs? What happens when our freedom clashes with the freedom of others? Sartre does not offer easy answers. He does not promise a world of peace and harmony. Instead, he forces us to confront the reality that our freedom will always be in tension with the freedom of others. And in that tension, we find the true nature of our existence, complex, messy, and ultimately human. As we continue on this journey, we begin to see the connections between our individual struggles and the larger struggles of humanity. We are not isolated in our search for meaning. Each person's journey is part of a greater tapestry, a web of interconnected lives. And yet, in this realization, we also see the danger of losing ourselves in the crowd. the temptation to conform, to blend in, to let the expectations of others shape our choices. But Sartre reminds us that to truly be free, we must resist this temptation. We must embrace our individuality, our uniqueness, and refuse to be swayed by the collective pressure to conform. It is only in this rejection of the status quo that we can truly begin to create a life that is authentically ours. And so, we are left with the question, what will we do with our freedom? Will we continue to live in the shadows of our fears, of our doubts, of our past mistakes? Or will we step into the light, embracing the unknown and creating a life that is true to ourselves? The choice is ours, but with that choice comes the weight of responsibility. For as Sartre reminds us, we are not merely passive observers of our existence. We are active participants, creators of our own destiny. And it is in this active participation that we find both our freedom and our burden. The question then is not whether we will find freedom, but whether we are ready to accept it. As the tension builds, as the silence deepens, we are reminded of something fundamental. Freedom, at its core, is a double-edged sword. The very nature of freedom is not just liberation, but also isolation. To be free is to stand alone, to carve your own path in the wilderness without the comforting hand of guidance. How many of us have spent our lives seeking freedom, thinking it would be the answer to our restlessness, our discontent? And yet, when it arrives, it carries with it a stark reality. Freedom does not protect us from the weight of our choices. No, it exposes us to them, magnifying their significance, pulling them into the light where we can no longer ignore them. Are we truly prepared to bear that weight? In these moments of deep introspection, we are often faced with a mirror that reveals not just our image, but the very core of our being. Sartre's philosophy thrusts us into that confrontation, into the quiet, uncomfortable space where our beliefs, our actions, and our past are laid bare. The question then becomes, who are we when we are no longer defined by the roles we've played, by the labels others have placed on us? Who are we when we are stripped of all pretense, all distractions, and left alone with nothing but the truth of our own existence? In this moment, there is no escape, no way to hide from the rawness of our humanity. But here's the paradox, that we cannot escape. The more we strive for meaning, the more we search for purpose, the more we realize that the very act of searching is a reflection of our own inner emptiness. For how can we fill a void with something external when that void is a product of our own creation? Sartre speaks of this existential gap, the space between what we are and what we want to become, and it is in that space that we find the deepest form of struggle. It is the space where desire and reality collide, where the search for fulfillment becomes the search for an identity that is constantly slipping through our fingers. And so we find ourselves at the crossroads of choice, where the direction we take will determine the course of our lives. There is no easy path, no roadmap to follow. Sartre forces us to face the terrifying truth. There is no inherent meaning in life, no predetermined destiny. We are not born with a purpose. Purpose is something we must create, something we must forge from the raw material of our own existence. But how do we create purpose when we are unsure of who we are, when we have no clear sense of direction? In the silence of our own minds, in the void of uncertainty, we must find the courage to choose. But how can we choose when we are paralyzed by the weight of possibility? Perhaps the answer lies not in finding the right path, but in the very act of choosing. In that choice, we affirm our freedom, our existence. We give meaning to our lives, not by waiting for it to be handed to us, but by daring to create it for ourselves. But this is not a simple act. It is not a mere decision made in the comfort of certainty. No, this choice is made in the midst of confusion, of chaos, of doubt. It is made when the world is pulling us in 1,000 directions, when every voice around us is shouting to tell us who we should be. And yet, in that moment of choice, we find our power. For it is not in the act of following, but in the act of creating, that we come to know who we truly are. In this search for meaning, we begin to understand something profound about the nature of existence. that the only true freedom lies not in escaping the world around us, but in embracing the world within us. The world outside may be full of noise, of expectations, of pressures, but it is in the quiet moments in the solitude of our own minds that we discover the deepest truths about ourselves. But here's the catch. The more we uncover, the more we realize that these truths are not always comfortable. Sometimes the truth is ugly. Sometimes the truth is painful. But in that pain, in that discomfort, there is growth. There is transformation. And so, we arrive at a profound realization. The search for meaning is not about finding the perfect answer, but about learning to live with the questions. Sartre's philosophy challenges us to stop seeking external validation, to stop looking for answers in the world around us. The answers, he suggests, are already inside us. They are buried beneath the layers of fear, of doubt, of insecurity. But we must be willing to face them, to confront them head-on, without flinching. It is in that confrontation that we find our true power. Not in the answers, but in the questions. Not in the certainty, but in the uncertainty. But as we delve deeper into this journey, we begin to sense something even more profound. Freedom is not simply about choosing who we want to be, but about accepting who we are. It is about accepting the raw, unfiltered truth of our existence, with all its flaws, its contradictions, and its imperfections. We must come to terms with the fact that we are not perfect, that we will make mistakes, that we will fail. But it is in these failures, in these moments of vulnerability, that we find the true meaning of freedom. For it is only when we accept our own humanity, with all its brokenness, that we can begin to live authentically. This is where the tension intensifies. We cannot simply will ourselves into freedom. We cannot simply choose to be free and expect the world to bend to our will. No, Sartre teaches us that freedom is not something we can take for granted. It is something we must constantly fight for. It is something we must earn day by day in the face of doubt, of fear, of opposition. But in that fight, in that struggle, we find our true strength. It is not in the easy victories that we learn who we are. It is in the battles we face, in the moments when we feel we cannot go on, that we come to understand the depth of our own power. And so, we return to the silence, to the place where it all began. For it is in the silence, in the stillness, that we find the answers we've been searching for. Not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet of our own minds. It is here, in the solitude, that we confront the deepest truths about ourselves. And in that confrontation, we are given the greatest gift of all, the power to create our own meaning, to define our own existence and to choose our own path. But with that gift comes a question. What will we do with it? Will we embrace the freedom that comes with it, or will we shrink from the responsibility? The choice is ours, but the cost of inaction is far greater than we realize. In the moments of silence, where the weight of existence settles upon us, we are forced to recognize something we've spent a lifetime trying to avoid. We are not simply beings living within the world. We are the very creators of the world we experience. Every moment, every thought, every decision we make shapes our reality. Sartre forces us to confront this undeniable truth. The world does not define us. We define the world. This realization is both liberating and terrifying. To know that our choices carve out the path of our existence means we hold the power of creation within us. But with this power comes a responsibility so vast, so daunting, that most would rather turn away. And yet, turning away is not an option, not for those who truly wish to live. Do we dare face that responsibility? To take ownership of every facet of our lives, no matter how messy, how complicated, how seemingly out of control? The world has conditioned us to believe that we must seek answers outside ourselves. That fulfillment comes from achieving success, accumulating wealth, or gaining approval from others. But Sartre's message echoes louder still. These are distractions, illusions crafted to keep us from realizing the simple, frightening truth. We are alone in our freedom, alone in our choices. And it is in this solitude that we must stand tall, face our fears, and acknowledge that only by accepting full responsibility for our lives can we truly begin to live. But there's a deeper layer to this struggle. one that continues to haunt us even as we walk the path of self-realization. Even as we take the reins of our own existence, the world around us, the people we encounter, continue to offer their opinions, their judgments, their expectations. We are constantly bombarded with messages about who we should be, what we should value, how we should live. It is no easy task to resist these influences, to stay grounded in our own understanding of self when the world is so eager to shape us into something else. But Sartre teaches us that to succumb to these pressures is to deny our own authenticity. To live as others want us to is to surrender our freedom, our power to create meaning. It is to become a mere reflection of the world, rather than the creator of it. This is where the tension becomes unbearable. How do we live authentically in a world that demands conformity? How do we stand firm in our individuality when everything around us urges us to fit in? Sartre's answer is not an easy one. He tells us that true freedom is not about avoiding conflict, but about embracing it. It is in the clash between our inner selves and the external pressures of the world that we discover who we truly are. It is only when we face this tension, when we are pulled in every direction, that we truly begin to understand the magnitude of our own power. For it is in our resistance to the world's demands, in our refusal to conform, that we find the strength to define ourselves on our own terms. And yet, in the face of this battle, many choose the path of least resistance. They choose comfort over authenticity, conformity over freedom. And who can blame them? The world is loud, and its demands are constant. It is much easier to follow the crowd, to live a life that others deem acceptable, than it is to stand alone and carve out a path that is entirely our own. But in that comfort, in that submission, we lose the very essence of what it means to live. We become prisoners of our own fear, trapped in a cycle of self-denial. Sartre's existentialism forces us to ask, is this the life we want? Is this the price we are willing to pay for the illusion of safety? There is no middle ground, no compromise in Sartre's philosophy. To live authentically is to live without excuses, without hiding behind the masks of society or the expectations of others. It is to take full ownership of every thought, every action, and every consequence. But there is something deeply unsettling in this idea. A fear that grips the heart. A fear that whispers, what if I make the wrong choice? What if I choose wrong, and my life becomes a mess? A series of mistakes I cannot undo. This fear is natural, but it is also a lie. For Sartre, there is no right or wrong path. There is only the path we create for ourselves and the responsibility we take for it. It is not the mistakes that define us, but how we respond to them. And in that response, we discover the very essence of who we are. But as we continue down this road, we begin to realize something deeper still. Our freedom is not just a gift, but a challenge. A challenge that demands we confront not only our fears, but also our desires. What do we truly want? Not what society tells us we should want, not what our friends or family think we should desire, but what we, deep inside, truly yearn for. In the quiet moments of solitude, when the noise of the world fades away, we are left with this question, and it is a question that carries great weight, for the answer will shape the very course of our lives. It will determine the choices we make, the relationships we form, and the legacy we leave behind. Sartre's existentialism reminds us that we cannot hide from this question. We cannot ignore it or pretend it doesn't matter. Our desires are a reflection of who we are, of the inner truth that lies beneath the surface. To deny them is to deny ourselves, but to give in to them blindly, without understanding their deeper meaning, is to be ruled by them. The key is not to avoid desire, but to confront it head-on, to understand it, and to choose it consciously. In this act of conscious choice, we reclaim our power, our freedom, and our authenticity. And so we arrive at the final, most difficult realization of all. True freedom is not simply about choosing who we want to be. It is about accepting the full weight of that choice and the consequences that come with it. It is about embracing the uncertainty, the chaos, the messiness of life, and still standing tall. It is about living with the knowledge that we are the architects of our own fate, and that every moment is a chance to redefine ourselves. But it is also about accepting that in the process of creating our own meaning, we may lose everything we thought we knew. We may lose the approval of others, the comforts of conformity, and the illusion of safety. But in losing these things, we gain something far more valuable: our true selves, free from the constraints of society, free from the expectations of others, free to live as we were always meant to live. This is the journey Sartre invites us to take, a journey of self-discovery, of freedom, and of ultimate responsibility. It is a journey that demands courage, that demands we face the darkest corners of our own souls. But it is also a journey that leads us to the truest form of freedom. Freedom not from the world, but from the illusions that bind us to it. And it is in that freedom that we truly come to know who we are and what it means to live authentically. The question remains, will we choose that freedom no matter the cost? Or will we turn away, afraid of what we might become? The choice is ours. The path ahead is not a simple one, and Sartre's philosophy offers no illusions of ease or comfort. As we move through the murkiness of our own existence, we may find ourselves stumbling, struggling against the weight of choices we did not foresee. But this too is part of the journey. The truth is not a place we arrive at. It is a living, breathing process, one that unfolds with every decision, every misstep, every moment of doubt. In this process, we begin to see something profound. A deeper layer of freedom emerges, one not merely rooted in choice but in the understanding that freedom itself is not a singular event, but a continual struggle. We are free not because we have arrived, but because we continue to choose, continue to create, continue to confront the very nature of who we are. This ongoing struggle, this perpetual creation, is what makes freedom both beautiful and terrifying. For what do we do when faced with the knowledge that we alone are responsible for who we become, and that each decision carries the weight of all others that came before it? This is the question Sartre dares us to face. It is not enough to passively live out our lives, blindly following a script handed to us by others. To live authentically is to write our own script, to construct our own identity, moment by moment, choice by choice. But in doing so, we must confront something raw and unyielding: the fact that we are both the creators and the destroyers of our own lives. There are moments when the weight of this realization will feel unbearable. The temptation to retreat, to turn away from the responsibility of self-creation, will be strong. The world will continue to push against us, to impose its expectations, its judgments, its desires. It is all too easy to fall into the trap of conformity, to silence the voice within that urges us to break free. But Sartre insists that in these very moments of tension, of internal conflict, we encounter the heart of our freedom. For freedom is not the absence of struggle, it is the embrace of struggle. It is in the tension between what we are and what we want to become that we find the strength to push forward. The world may seek to define us, but we must define ourselves in return. As we navigate this internal battlefield, we are reminded of one crucial point. Freedom in its purest form is a solitary experience. It is a journey that we must take alone, even though we may walk beside others. No one can make the choice for us. No one can shoulder the burden of our responsibility. In these moments of solitude, we are faced with our own reflection, our own desires, our own fears. And it is here, in the quietest corners of our existence, that we must make the hardest choices. Who will we be? What will we stand for? What legacy will we leave behind? Yet in the midst of this solitude, we also realize something else, that, in embracing our aloneness, we unlock the possibility of true connection. For when we stop relying on others to define us, when we stop seeking validation from the outside world, we become more fully ourselves. And in becoming more fully ourselves, we are able to connect with others in a way that is pure, authentic, and meaningful. It is only when we own our own freedom, when we take responsibility for our own lives, that we are able to truly see and understand others. This is the paradox of Sartre's existentialism. In our aloneness, we find the potential for the deepest connections. But this is not a comfortable truth. It is not a message that offers reassurance or easy answers. To embrace our freedom means to embrace uncertainty, to acknowledge that we cannot control everything, that we cannot predict every outcome. It means accepting that we are constantly in the process of becoming, and that there will be times when we falter when we make mistakes. But in that very imperfection we find our humanity. Sartre teaches us that the act of living authentically is not about achieving some ideal state, but about embracing the messiness of life, the contradictions, the complexities. To live authentically is to accept the chaos of existence, to dance with it, and to find meaning in the struggle itself. So we return to the question that haunts us. What will we do with our freedom? How will we shape our lives now that we know we are the architects of our own meaning? The answer is not clear-cut, not easy, and certainly not comforting. But Sartre's philosophy does offer us one thing: the recognition that we have the power to choose, to create, to define. It is in this choice, in this active participation in our own existence, that we discover the truth of who we are. The road ahead may be uncertain and the choices we face may seem overwhelming, but there is power in knowing that we are not victims of fate, that we are not bound by the past nor by the expectations of others. We are free, free to create, free to choose, free to live in a way that is true to ourselves. But in that freedom comes the responsibility to make it count, to make it meaningful. It is up to us to decide what we will become, to define the legacy we will leave behind. This is the journey Sartre invites us to take, a journey that is both deeply personal and universally shared. It is a journey of self-discovery, of freedom, and of ultimate responsibility. It is a journey that demands courage, that requires us to face the darkest corners of our own souls. But it is also a journey that leads us to the truest form of freedom. Freedom, not from the world, but from the illusions that bind us to it. And it is in that freedom that we truly come to know who we are and what it means to live authentically. The question remains, as it always has: will we choose to live in the fullness of our freedom, or will we shrink back into the shadows, too afraid of the responsibility it demands? Will we step into the unknown, willing to face the uncertainties of existence and create a life that is our own? The choice is ours, and with it, the power to shape our destiny. As we stand on the precipice of our own existence, the question looms larger than ever. Will we embrace the freedom that is rightfully ours, or will we allow fear, doubt, and the pressures of the world to dictate who we become? Sartre's philosophy demands that we confront this question, but it also offers us the gift of power, the power to choose, to create, and to live authentically. There is no waiting for the perfect moment, no time to waste in the shadows of inaction. The time is now, the choice is yours, and it is in the act of choosing that your true freedom begins. So, what will you do with this freedom? Will you continue to live according to the expectations of others, or will you step into the unknown, shaping your life in a way that is uniquely your own? The path ahead may be uncertain, but it is yours to walk, and every step you take is a declaration of who you choose to be. If you are ready to embrace this power, to break free from the constraints that bind you, I invite you to take the first step today. Subscribe, dive deeper into the philosophy of freedom, and begin the journey of defining your own existence. This is not just a video, it's the beginning of your transformation, one decision at a time. You have the power. Now go and create. The world is waiting for you to step into your own.